For this project, I'm using the Southern Grace embossed sunflower circle die. I'm going to stamp it to give it a little bit more detail. I'm just using a metal stamp with a circular pattern. I did wet the veg tan before I started stamping. This helps to create a deeper impression onto the veg tan leather, and it helps it last longer. Now it's time to paint. I'm going to use the Angelus leather paints that I purchased off Amazon. I'm going to start with yellow, and you'll see that I'll go over it later with a little bit different color yellow. I prefer to layer my paints because I feel like it makes it a little more realistic looking. Now that I have the yellow put on, I'm going to mix a yellow and an orange together. And then I'm going to go on the bottom and give it a little bit of definition here. Sunflowers out in the wild have a couple different colors, and typically the more towards the center you go, the darker it becomes. So you'll see that in a little bit we'll be using a red in there as well to make it darker. Okay, so I'm going to do the center of the sunflower. I'm mixing a brown and an orange together and just kind of brushing it on in a little bit of a circular motion. You can see that I add a little bit more orange to this one and then I darken it up. I like to have, like I said, the layers where there's more than one color. It gives it more contrast. It helps it to look more realistic. So here you'll see I grab a little bit darker brown to add to the center because, again, once you get closest to the center, it is darker. And it's easy to just blend it in by using a circular motion like I did before. So now I'm mixing the yellow and orange again, but I'm trying to get a little bit lighter than the darker and a little bit darker than the lighter. I wanted to layer this, like I said earlier, just because I feel like it gives it a little bit more dimension. So I'm going over the brightest yellow with this color that I just mixed. And you can see I'm going right up to the darker orange that I used earlier because I want to make sure that it's blending into the orange. So I'm going to grab a tad bit of red and add it to the orange and yellow mixture that I made. I'm going to go to the very bottom of the little petals and add this. Again, with the layering of the colors, it helps to make this more dimensional, gives it more realistic look. I'm trying to stay right at the bottom of the petals and just lightly blend into the darker orange that I used earlier. So I wanted to blend a little better, so I took some of the orange from earlier, the orange and yellow that I had blended from earlier, and just going over a little bit more to make sure it looks blended. Okay, so next I'm adding a little bit of yellow to that mixture I made of the orange and yellow, and I'm just going to take it and slightly go around the outside of the center sunflower. This helps to give it some dimension and look more realistic. And because you guys know I all love to layer my paints, I am adding a little bit more of the darker brown in to where I went in with the lighter yellow. Again, this is just to give it a little more depth and dimension. I also grabbed a little bit of a darker brown and added it at the very bottom there towards the center of the sunflower. So I'm going to do the background now, and I'm using the Angelus turquoise leather paint. I love the contrast of the turquoise and the yellow. I feel like this really helps that sunflower to pop. So the color wheel, blue and yellow are not quite opposites. it's actually purple and yellow, but when you use blue and yellow, you're getting somewhat of that same effect where when you use opposites on the color wheel, you're going to really make those colors stand out. So now I'm going to go in with the EcoFlow Super Sheen leather finish, but I'm going to be very careful to only go onto the parts that I painted. I do not want to go into the grooves where the embossing is, because we're going to add antique finish and we want that antique finish to hold in the grooves. If we use the leather sheen, the leather finisher, it's not going to hold the antique. So we want to make sure we do not get into the little embossing crevices. But we do want to put it on the painted parts because it's going to help that antique not to stay, and it's going to also make sure that it's not dulling the color when we antique it. So I love Phoebings. I'm using the dark brown antique for my sunflowers, and I get a nice generous scoop on my dauber, and I just use a circular motion. Then I take a cloth or paper towel and I wipe off the excess. I went back into this one a second time because I really wanted to get in the grooves, make sure the antique stood out. Now it's time to add the hardware. I'm using my small needle nose pliers to add the hooks. Here they are finished. What do you think? Comment below.